Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. American Comics. Strongest Thor in Marvel. Chapter 21. After Thor left, Gao Tianzun was thinking about the next arrangement. After a long time, he said, give him a gold card with 1 million universe coins. The fat ant beside her looked at the boss in surprise. Are you sure? Has the iron cock plucked? Gao Tianzun said with a gloomy smile. If he loses, the gold card will go back to me, and it's useless to give him more money. What if he wins? If he wins, the value he can bring will far exceed 1 million. Not long after returning to the residence, someone sent a gold card. In theory, he was good enough to buy a small flight boat and get away. But after receiving the money, it is not easy to do things, but he promised to play at least 3 games. Anyway, it's not much to go back to Earth recently. 8 years away from the most recent major drama. 1 million, all bet on himself according to Thor's request. At the same time, throughout Sakaar, rumors began to spread that there was a kid who didn't know what to do and who was going to challenge the defending champion in 3 days. In the rumors, a lot of analysis of strength was revealed, and the summary was, that challenger was kicked in the head by a donkey. Nebula was very dissatisfied and wanted to find out who was talking nonsense, but after searching around, he found that one of the sources of the rumors was Thor. What is this operation? 3 days later, on the dueling arena, Thor walked proudly on the arena stage with a giant sword in one hand and a shield in the other. Opposite him was a monster with a huge lizard head over 8 meters tall. Although this guy doesn't have a weapon in his hand, his pair of barbed claws are more than 1 meter long, his thick arms are much thicker than Thor's thighs, and he has a big mouth full of fangs. A black hole 1 meter wide. It's not Professor Lizard, don't guess, it's just a cannon fodder, a made-up race. After all, the universe is full of wonders. Good evening ladies and gentlemen, you will see the most exciting matchup tonight. Gao Tianzun's voice sounded, causing more than 100,000 people to cheer. Gao Tianzun continued to introduce. The side that defends the ring, I don't think I need to introduce more. This is the champion who has won 66 consecutive games, the tyrannical Tyrannosaurus Rex. His skin is harder than steel, and ordinary swords can't pierce it. He and his sharp claws have already disemboweled 66 ignorant and fearless challengers. He changed the subject. Let me introduce today's challenger, the electrified one, Mr. Pikachu. The overwhelming hiss sounded, even overshadowing the roar of the lizardman. No matter in terms of size or appearance, Thor, who is less than 2 meters long, is incomparable with the lizardman. The long sword in his hand might not even be able to pierce the lizardman's skin, right? And the shield, under these sharp claws, is no different from paper. For a while, many spectators were placing bets. Thor's odds are even higher, 1 to 123. It could have been higher, but after I noticed that Xingyan bet 1 million on Thor, Gao Tianzun, a shameless old thief, also bet 1 million. Amidst the cheers of countless people, the lizard man launched a charge. The next moment, he wanted to tear this little ant into pieces. Thor rolled over, avoiding its sharp claws, which slapped the ground heavily. Thor raised the shield, and with a few muffled, bang bang bang, it nailed the steel claws to the ground like nails. Lizard man, he struggled to pull out his claws, and roared angrily. But Thor didn't give it time to struggle. He raised his long sword and leapt high, jumping into the roaring bloody mouth of the lizard man Zhang Kai. Amidst the panting sound of the audience, the lizard man let out a muffled sound, and his huge body froze. The next moment, flesh and blood flew from the back of the neck, and a big hole was broken, and Thor rushed out bathed in thunder and lightning. Boom! The giant fell to the ground, and Thor put away his long sword. There was silence for a while, and a few seconds later, deafening cheers suddenly broke out. In the VIP room, several maids are giving Thor a massage. Gao Tianzun thoughtfully sent several maids who conformed to human aesthetics. If Thor wanted to do something, they would certainly not refuse. It's just that Thor still has integrity in many cases, especially when there is a beautiful underage girl who is always staring at him. Nebula walked in. Hey, when are we leaving? Thor didn't answer. He glanced at the taskbar that had just appeared. Hey, congratulations to the host for triggering Gao Tianzun's exclusive mission. Power and glory, there is nothing better than a hearty duel to explain the romance of a man. Mission objective. Win 300 consecutive battles in Sakar's dual field. Mission reward. Active skill, Resurrection. Resurrection. Resurrect a target that has been dead for less than 30 hours, with a 1-year cooldown. Note: because of infinite gems, the dead cannot be resurrected, and the natural dead cannot be resurrected. The fewer words, the better the reward. The ancients did not deceive me. The simple resurrection technique, although it has limitations, can still be regarded as the strongest reward I have seen since the system was opened. Although it seems incomparable with Time Gem has a big limitation. The stronger the target controlled by time, the higher the requirement for the gem user's strength. Just like Shi Xuanqi can easily turn back the time of the entire street with gems, countless decedents can be saved from accidents. But Ancient One has no way to use gems to prolong her life. She would rather use the dark power of Dormammu to quench her thirst with poison. And this, resurrection, skill does not have this limitation. The only downside is that it takes too long to cool down. Quote, as far as Thor knows, this is the ability of Gao Tianzun in the 616 universe. And in the 199,999 universe he is in, Gao Tianzun is just a joke. Winning 300 games in a row, it seems that this is a long-term task, and I have to stay in Sakar for a long time. Thor turned his head and asked Nebula, is there any place you want to go? Nebula shook her head. Her homeland was completely destroyed long ago because of her resistance to Thanos' half-destruction policy. Actually following Thor, the big reason is because I can't find my future direction. Thor smiled and said, then we'll rest here for a while. For ordinary people, this is hell. But for us, it's often easier to live on this chaotic planet, what do you think? Nebula nodded. Last night, 2 guys in the bar tried to strike up a fight with her after failing to strike up a conversation with her. In the end, she chopped them up and fed them to the fish. The law enforcement team rushed to know that she was Thor's person, and immediately nodded and bowed and sent her inside. It made her feel good. If this kind of thing is on the planet of order, it will be very troublesome. Because of the previous gamble, Nebula brought back more than 100 million universe coins, and they bought a mansion not far from the arena as a temporary home. It's a pity that there will not be such good odds in the future. 3 days later, Thor participated in the second match, with a single stroke of thunder. A week later, in the third game, the opponent was a no-brainer fighter. With enough strength, a sword pierced people, armor and shields, and pierced the heart. A very powerful Mr. Pikachu appeared in Sakar, which not only ended the winning streak, but also had very cool skills. More people came to watch, and all the seats were full for a while. Boom, the real man never looked back at the explosion. Amidst the cheers that filled the sky, Thor put away his weapon and turned back to the exit. Ah, Pikachu is my god. Baby, I want to give birth to a monkey for you. Thor glanced evilly, and found that the person who was yelling this was an alien beauty with a human body and a bull's head, and his face turned pale and he quickly quickened his pace. When passing Gao Tianzun's office, he suddenly heard a voice. Scavenger 142, there is something to deliver. Looking at a black and strong ant who smelled of alcohol walking towards the front. No, 142, that surviving Valkyrie. Many years ago, there was a family ethics drama in Asgard. Well, a palace coup, Odin, who was obedient to the outside world, attacked the inside, and sent a powerful army Valkyrie to crusade against Hela. Different from the Valkyrie that people in Norse mythology give benefits to warriors, each of the real Valkyrie is the most powerful warrior, and can be called the third most powerful force under Odin and Hela. However, Hela's strength is too strong, and her night sky sword is a super artifact no less than Mjolnir. After a fierce battle, Valkyrie was almost wiped out, leaving only the last survivor, and the huge amounts of Hela consumed were also sealed by Odin. Later, the unwillingness to be defeated and the guilt of her friends made the last Valkyrie self-defeating. In order to escape these, she came to Sakar, where she became one of the main fighters of the Grandmaster, under the alias of Scavenger number 142. To this day, the Valkyrie has become a legend in Asgard. The Valkyrie of this universe does not belong to the name of any of the 28 Valkyrie that I know. She was the last to join and usually kept a low profile because of her distinctive looks. Not long after she joined, she participated in the Great War, so most of the Asgard people didn't know her name, including the stonemason who stayed on Earth. The name of Valkyrie is not mentioned in the movie, and many versions of the original book have different names, so the Valkyrie in different universes is different by default, and the movie universe treats her as not belonging to the well-known 28 people. After all, there are no black people in the Valkyrie we know. Watching Valkyrie enter Gao Tianzun's office to bargain, Thor also walked in. "Hi, good brother, you're here." Gao Tianzun rushed forward with enthusiasm and wanted a hug, but Thor quickly moved away. Thor is now his super cash cow, brilliant thunder, excellent physical skills, powerful strength, and flexibility that does not match his weight, allowing him to bring huge traffic. Gao Tianzun seriously doubts that even if Thor is allowed to embroider flowers on the field, there will be a bunch of people willing to contribute tickets. Saying hello to Gao Tianzun, Thor turned to Valkyrie and said, "Let's chat in another place." A powerful Valkyrie is an important force for the current Asgard. "I don't think there's much to talk about." "Yes, because you are Valkyrie." Valkyrie froze for a moment, then his face turned cold. "No, I'm not Valkyrie, I'm a scavenger." "You are escaping. Escaping won't solve any problems." Thor shouted. I think I should express my opinion." At this time Gao Tianzun interrupted, "I think if you and His Royal Highness have a misunderstanding, you should really have a good discussion and then consider how to make a decision." Gao Tianzun is completely helping Thor. "You are the son of Odin. No wonder. Your Royal Highness, I am afraid you will be disappointed. I will not participate in your family farce. It was because of this that I lost everything last time. Therefore, no matter what happens in Asgard now, it will follow I don't care anymore." Valkyrie was instantly agitated. Gao Tianzun helped his forehead, and he seemed to be doing a disservice. Thor was thinking about how to answer when he suddenly saw a system task appear. "Hey, congratulations to the host for triggering the exclusive quest for Valkyrie. Brave souls, at one time, Valkyrie was the most powerful warrior in Asgard, but was exhausted due to a civil war. Now, you need to liberate their souls and let them be redeemed. Mission objective: redeem the 28 Valkyrie sacrificed. Mission reward: artifact, Soul Castle. Soul Castle. The interior is a huge hall, which can guide the souls of the dead Valkyrie and let them enter the Soul Castle. The heroic spirit will be attached to the host and can be reborn in the Soul Castle after death. This means that he can re-own this Valkyrie guard." Thor's face sank and said, "You are right, the sword of Valkyrie is used to protect Asgard and its own people, not to fight for power. But do you know that Ragnarok is coming, and if this hurdle cannot be passed, Asgard will be completely destroyed." He looked at Valkyrie's dark color, and added the last sentence, "For the future of Asgard, I will reach an agreement with Hela, so that your sisters can be redeemed and the prestige of Valkyrie can reappear in Asgard." What is Valkyrie's biggest egg wish? Revenge? No, she and Hela don't actually have a particularly big feud. The crusade against Hela was counter-killed, and what she hated most was not Hela but Odin. What really broke her was the loss of her sisters, the loss of the Valkyrie army, and Odin covering up everything about Hela, including this history of course. If it was simply to reconcile with Hela, she would never agree. But if it can be exchanged for the salvation of the sisters, that is another matter. She thought about it and said, "If what you say is true, I will consider serving Asgard again after you inherit the throne. But don't expect me to continue to participate in the royal family battle. This is enough. Okay, at least 10 more years, I'm not in a hurry." Gao Tianzun's expression changed a little. He was worried that the traffic king who had finally met would just abduct Valkyrie and run away, and he and Thor were only considered a cooperative relationship, so there was no reason to restrict him. But since it is not urgent, let's go, then don't worry. After a few years, no matter how good a gladiator is, it will bring aesthetic fatigue. Thor settled in at Sakaar, playing an average of 1 match every other week. There are actually very few strong men in the universe. The tyrannical Tyrannosaurus Rex I encountered for the first time is already the best among them. Most of the opponents are actually very bad. Even Nebula, who has not grown up, can easily deal with it up. But Thor still kindly gave them a chance to perform. A super gladiator who can fight and act can bring considerable benefits. Gao Tianzun said that he likes this kind of person the most. Later, under Thor's suggestion, Gao Tianzun added a new rule: any prisoner or slave who wins 30 times in a row will be free and can get a lot of money, beauty, and power. Whenever this time comes, the tickets for the arena will increase by more than 10 times. Thor is the 30th opponent. Xing Yun gradually got used to such a comfortable life. When she is free, she will also go to the arena to show her hands. Well, in order to encourage more people to sign up for the expanded arena, slaves are not allowed to kill free gladiators, and the restraints around their necks can be activated at any time. On the other side, in Asgard, Thor's disappearance once attracted the attention of many people. Loki often deliberately gloats in front of the three of Fandral. The three warriors of Asgard hate him, but they can't beat him. Loki: I just like the feeling when you want to beat me but can't beat me. Sif and Maya Hansen were very worried at the beginning and asked the Queen. Although Frigg told them not to worry, they were still uneasy. Fortunately, Thor sent them a message later, and they were relieved. For the long-lived Sif, this time difference is nothing, as long as they don't lose contact. As for Maya Hansen, she often ignores Thor for months when her research goes into a frenzy. In Odin's induction, Thor's life was not in danger, so he didn't care. Bear boy, let him accept the beatings of the society more. The time came to 2005. Asgard. Odin woke up from Odin's sleep long ago, but he didn't mention Thor. Frigg also kept silent. On the earth, Mjolnir is still lying there quietly. Stark continues to live a life of a playboy, unaware that a poisonous snake around him is becoming more and more unbearable to him. General Ross's super soldier plan has not progressed, and he is about to lose patience. His daughter, Betty Ross, is graduating from college this year and will join his military experiment team after graduation. It looked like everything was peaceful. People at this time can't imagine that this may be the last piece of the earth. A new era is coming. Hey, congratulations to the host for completing the task, strength and glory, and get the reward, resurrection. On the duel arena, Thor kicked away the corpse of an alien creature on the ground. After nearly 5 years, the 300-game winning streak was finally completed. In the past 5 years, not only have I completed the mission, but my skills have also improved a lot, and I have become familiar with various fighting styles. Counting the time, the official plot is about to start, and I am about to leave. I have greeted Gao Tianzun before, so I will go back to Xingyin directly. In recent years, thanks to Thor's superstar effect, the arena's income has been particularly high. Especially after Thor's weight returned from 400 caddies to 200 caddies, it attracted a lot of Yango who didn't care about the arena. The two are happy to work together. Although I know that Gao Tianzun is not a good guy, at least this old man is quite interesting if there is no conflict of interest. What's more, strictly speaking, Thor is not a good thing. Back at the residence, Xing Yun jumped out with anticipation and asked, "How is it? When are we going back to Asgard?" Xing Yun, who has grown up completely, exudes a wild charm because he has not been mechanically transformed like the original work. Over the past few years, they have been together day and night, and the relationship between the two is a matter of course. A foreign country, a lonely man and a widow. Now Xing Yun has a much more cheerful personality. Glancing at Thor, she actually looks forward to going to Asgard, just hoping to meet his parents, Odin and Frigg. Thor called out, "Heimdall, take us back." Years ago, Odin announced the release of Thor from exile. Originally, I wanted him to experience the beatings of people in the society more, so that he could beat them again when he came back. I didn't expect Thor to be so open outside. A dazzling colorful light pierced through the sky, and Thor and Nebula disappeared. Gao Tianzun watched from afar. To be honest, he kind of misses it. I don't know when he will meet the next partner who is really interesting and can bring traffic. Finally, back. Thor gave Heimdall a big bear hug. Back in Asgard, Sif and Maya Hansen ran to greet him at the first time, and ran into Nebula. As a latecomer, Xing Yun naturally would not dare to have any opinions. As for Sif and Maya Hansen, they know the customs of Asgard very well, and they naturally know how tough the folk customs of Asgard are. At some banquets, they even fight whoever they see, and run away if they win. In the past few hundred years, it was only under the strong request of Queen Frigg that it became a little more civilized. Compared to Thor, who is the crown prince, he is simply a model of a good man. More importantly, they are not little women attached to men, and they all have their own careers. In fact, when Thor is not around, I can concentrate more on work. If you switch to the kind that needs to revolve around men, I'm afraid it will blow up after 5 years. Loki ran out with a relaxed expression on his face, with the usual beating on his mouth. Brother, I didn't expect you to be alive, I thought you were dead. After looking at Thor's figure, exclaimed, wow, I suddenly believe that you went out to eat vegetarian food for 5 years. Weak chicken, you are doing your best every day again. Walking towards the palace, the atmosphere became obviously a lot more serious. At the gate of the palace, Frigga looked at him worriedly. After you go in, don't make your father angry. She would never forget Odin's terrifying look when he just came out. She only saw this expression once, the last time, it was in. Thor knew it well, and he followed Frigga into the hall. Frigga rarely enters the hall at ordinary times, but today, she must go in. Just entering the hall, Thor narrowed his eyes. Odin on the throne has a serious face, wearing a golden armor, and holding the weapon that has accompanied him for thousands of years. Gun of Eternity, Kungunir. I'm depressed now. I foolishly thought that you would be different, unique, and a benevolent king. But now I realize I was wrong, you are exactly like Hela. Odin's voice was thick anger. His own seal has mysterious power, and a very powerful magic ability is required to remove it. Kamar Taj will never meddle in Asgard's family affairs, so the only one who has the ability to be lifted. And according to Heimdall, Thor disappeared in that particular place in Northern Europe 5 years ago. If Odin still can't guess, he will be the Lord of the 9 Realms in vain. The powerless Thor can escape from Hela and break the seal, so Odin has to guess the worst. When Frigga heard the name, Hela, her gaze became even more dignified. The name is taboo, and Odin never mentions it. Hela, Thor sneered. Now that he knew it, he didn't plan to hide it anymore. I never agreed with your point of view. My point of view will not change. It is still the same as it was 7 years ago. Thor, Frigga exclaimed. If Thor could admit his mistake, as the sole heir, perhaps he wouldn't be too harshly criticized, but she couldn't predict how Odin would deal with it. Odin ignored him, and said in a deep voice, that's not the reason for you to collude with Hela. Collusion. No, I also do not agree with Hela, I am fighting to defend my people. I will not take the initiative to launch an unjust aggression, but for those who dare to invade Asgard, Thor said murderously, even if you are far away, you will be killed. A great king must learn to be kind and tolerant. In many cases, violence cannot solve the problem. Odin was firm. My kindness will only be given to my people, not to the enemies who will harm the dead man people. As for tolerance, Thor sneered. Forgiveness and tolerance have only existed in fairy tales and dramas. In reality, the so-called tolerance is just a helpless, forget it. Violence may not solve the problem, but it can definitely solve the person who caused the problem. Odin finally understood that Thor had already gone his own way, and it was impossible for him to convince him anymore. He put down the eternal spear, and said dejectedly, if you do this, you will push more people to the enemy's side, and you will lead Asgard into the abyss. Thor looked indifferent. Maybe, but I think, no matter what the ending is, it's better than being swallowed by the eternal fire in the dusk of the gods. What? Odin and Frigga shrank their pupils at the same time. You know Ragnarok's prophecy. Ragnarok is a series of great catastrophes prophesied by Norse mythology, including a great battle that caused the death of many important gods. In this world, Ragnarok's prophecy is that Surtur will destroy Asgard. No one knows this prophecy except Odin and Frigga. I've known it for a long time. So I hope that on that day, Asgard's power can be united to face the catastrophe of the doomsday, instead of being wasted in meaningless royal fights. Odin was silent for a long while before slowly saying, this is why you befriended Hela. I understand, but you need to know that she is already a lunatic, so why do you believe that she is willing to work with you to prevent the prophecy from happening? Instead of destroying Asgard himself. Frigg hesitated to speak. In fact, she is still willing to trust her child, but she will not disobey her husband. Just because she has a share in Asgard's glory, just because she was once the crown prince of Asgard, just because she is my sister. Thor loudly said, Hela may be obsessed with Asgard's throne, but her feelings for Asgard will never be weak. In the original, when everyone flees and Ragnarok descends, only Hela fights for Asgard at the last moment. Thor turned his head and walked out of the hall, turning his head and said, I just told her what I said in the hall that day. She didn't do anything against me, but broke the seal for me. You don't understand her at all, and you don't understand I. Odin sat slumped on the king's seat and murmured, could it be that I was really wrong? Frigga stepped forward to comfort. No, you are not wrong, and Thor is not wrong. Your philosophies conflict, but they are all for Asgard after all. In fact, as the wisest person in Asgard, she identifies with Thor more. Those who love war will die, and those who forget war will be in danger. I believe in Thor, he will be an excellent king. In the end, Odin chose to compromise. On the one hand, although he still cannot accept Thor's ideas, he has to admit that Thor's ideas are more balanced than his own and Hela's. This kind of thinking is easier to be accepted by the public. On the other hand, and the most important reason, I really have no other choice. Loki doesn't think about it, and Hela, it's even more impossible, and the old Odin has no time and energy to cultivate another successor. Your Majesty didn't make things difficult for you just now, did you? As soon as he entered his palace, the 3 Sif women surrounded him, and it was Sif who spoke. Although she didn't know exactly what happened, she still vaguely heard Odin's roar. Sif is most worried about Odin and Thor getting into trouble. As a warrior of Asgard, in theory she must be loyal to the king. But there is also that special relationship between her and Thor. Once there is a conflict, she will feel very embarrassed. Thor smiled and shook his head to comfort him. It's okay, it's just that I've been running out for so long, and I want to show my majesty again. Sif gave a pop smile, and couldn't help but pat Thor lightly, and the atmosphere suddenly relaxed a lot. After today's showdown, presumably Odin will not interfere with himself again. But at the same time, I will not guide myself in all aspects like before. Now Thor, even if he succeeds to the throne, he is no longer the heir of Odin's policy. He is creating his own era. Ah, does this mean that the future, missing father mode, is gone? Shaking his head, he threw this idea out of his mind, and asked the restrained Nebula, how is it, are you used to staying in Asgard? Xing Yun nodded. It's good, but it's too extravagant, a little. She glanced around. Originally thought that Sakar's mansion with a swimming pool was already very luxurious, but after seeing the magnificent Asgard everywhere, she finally understood why she saw Thor, who was 400 caddies. Thor laughed loudly. Asgard's living standard is the top in the universe. Wait for the banquet tonight, let you experience real luxury. A life of luxury is not good, but cool. See the original. Nebula, who is so emotional, has turned into this cute and silly look, and the contrast is too great. Turning to Maya Hansen, he said, in a few days, I plan to visit the Earth. Do you want to go home and have a look? It suddenly occurred to me that it had been 10 years since I brought Maya Hansen away from Earth and came to Asgard. Although she has always been alone and has no relatives or friends, it is her home after all. After hearing this, Maya Hansen hesitated for a while, and suddenly showed a cheerful smile. If you want me to accompany you, then I will accompany you. As for going home, there is no need. Our home is now in Asgard. On Earth, a cafe. Thor held an old paper and said to Maya Hansen while looking at it, did you see it? It is said that General Ross is conducting a super soldier experiment and has hit a bottleneck. Are you interested? Maybe you can find it in the super soldier serum. Some inspirations to better improve extremis. Thor definitely knew that General Ross's experiment would not be successful. But his experiments led to the birth of the Hulk and the Abomination. Maybe I can try it. I thought about it more than 10 years ago, but the super soldier serum has long been gone. Even if there is a formula, I can't get it. Maya Hansen took the newspaper and looked at it, and suddenly smiled. Asked, hey, let me tell you, you've taken a fancy to someone else's daughter, haven't you? Amount, Thor foo forehead. But these words reminded Thor. General Ross attached great importance to his plan, and if he rashly wanted to participate, he would definitely not agree. Right now, Ross's daughter Betty Ross is about to graduate, and she will join the research team after graduation. It is very difficult to approach General Ross directly, so let's start with Betty Ross. So you're saying that the hammer that fell from the sky in New Mexico is actually yours? Your true identity is a god hidden in the world. Yes, if you have the chance, you might be able to witness the mighty power of the gods. In a brightly lit bar, a young man and woman were talking and laughing in low voices. Tisk tisk, Betty Ross, who had black hair and looked innocent just after graduation, curled her lips. Is this how you chase girls? Your story is quite interesting. What I said is true. There are still many people in this world who know about my existence, but they choose to keep it a secret. However, it won't be long. TCH, I don't believe you, just make it up. Betty Ross was going to relax before going to work, but she didn't refuse when Thor came to strike up a conversation. She didn't expect this guy to be a magic stick. Thor smiled and didn't refute. In a few years, Stark will admit Iron Man's identity under the lens of a large number of media. By that time, the existence of superhero will no longer be concealed, and will officially enter people's field of vision. I'm a little dizzy, I'm going back. Betty Ross obviously wasn't very good at drinking. She grew up under her father's strict management since she was a child, and she finally indulged once after graduation. She stood up, staggering, ready to leave. Just a few steps away, a few punks surrounded him. Beauty, have you drunk too much? It's not safe to go home so late, how can I see you off? Betty Ross shook her head. No need, my house is very close. Although she has been a good girl for more than 20 years, she is not a fool. She definitely knows the mind of the little gangster. A group of punks refused to let her go and began to tease her, and Betty Ross pushed left and right. What are you doing? Let me go. Do you know who I am? Bang, with a muffled grunt, the little gangster who was pulling him was kicked out and smashed onto a nearby table. The punks were taken aback and looked at Thor, who stood in front of Betty Ross. Are you okay? Thor asked, concerned. Betty Ross, who was still in shock, shook her head. No, it's okay, there are too many of them, let's run, I'll call my dad to solve it. Don't be afraid, it's okay. Thor smiled lightly. The leading gangster took a good look at Thor. Although there was only one person on the other side, his strong body and the skill of kicking the flying man just now made him feel a little weak. Brother, which road is it on? As he spoke, he waved his hand, and all the gangsters around drew out their weapons and surrounded him. Thor turned a deaf ear, and flew up again. If he could do it, he would never force him. Betty Rose was on the phone anxiously. Before she finished dialing the phone number, she couldn't hear the sound of fighting. When she looked up, all the vicious gangsters were lying on the ground. She opened her mouth wide in surprise. What are you still doing in a daze? Let's go, I'll take you back. Thor smiled and rubbed her hair. Betty Ross wanted to say no, but thinking of the scene just now, she subconsciously didn't refuse. The two got into the car and left. After the two left, okay, everyone is gone, get up. The leader of the gangsters just now stood up suddenly and said. As soon as he finished speaking, the fools who had been lying on the ground wailing got up one by one, looking as if nothing had happened. Boss, this guy is really fierce. I almost thought I was going to die in the lap just now. Yes, this kid is picking up girls, right? I don't know why the Romanov agent gave us such a strange task. This guy has the potential to be a bit of a jerk, could it be, with a mean smile. Shut up, don't die. Half an hour later, at Betty Ross's home. Betty Ross took out a bottle of red wine, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to Thor. Law fight in 1982, have a drink. After walking for half an hour just now, the drunkenness dissipated long ago. Thor looked at this scene and said with a smile, when a girl invites a boy to her home and drinks with him. Can I imagine what will happen next? Betty Ross blushed, spat and said, what are you thinking? This is the wine I prepared a long time ago, specially reserved to celebrate my graduation. You just happened to be lucky. Don't talk about it, come on, cheers. She changed the subject abruptly, and Thor didn't expose her. He drank the red wine in the glass and asked, are you the only one in your family? Where are your parents? A look of sadness flashed across Betty's face, and she said softly, my mother left me very early. My father is a soldier. Although he was very strict with me, I saw him very rarely since I was a child. In a few days, I will go to participate in his research project. Obviously, the relationship between Betty and her father is not close, and she simply avoided the topic by saying a few words. Probably a release after depression, Betty drank a little too much tonight, and when the red wine bottomed out, he was already unconscious. Sending her back to the room, Thor hesitated. People obviously don't resist him. Should they be beasts, or are they worse than beasts? Between wanting to die brazenly and admitting indifference, Thor decisively chose the latter. In many cases, Thor still kept his integrity. If I take advantage of others tonight, although Betty Ross will most likely not blame him, but the relationship between the two can be brought to an end. Gently covering her with a quilt, Thor closed the door and went out. As soon as he went out and returned to the car, Thor was blocked. Looking at the pretty black figure in the co-pilot seat, Thor held his forehead. Natalia, long time no see. Natalia, who was dressed in a tight leather jacket, smiled coquettishly, seeing that Thor's bones were half broken. It's been 10 years, my dear Thor, your majesty Thor. The resentment in the tone, even Thor, who is said to have only 2 intelligence points, can hear it. I'm so happy, you still remember my name at that time. I haven't heard it for 10 years. I didn't expect that after so many years, the first thing I did when I came back was to ask me to cooperate with you to pick up girls. After working as an agent for so many years, Natalia, who has long been used to controlling her emotions, has the urge to curse at people at this moment. This kind of scumbag is really rare in the world. If you think about it carefully, there really are. There is an even worse one in Manhattan. Thor is sweating profusely. He definitely won't be so stupid as to ask the widow to help. He still has the desire to survive. He obviously contacted the black stewed egg. I guess he is dead bald and embarrassed to do this himself. I simply threw the blame on Natalia. Having said that, it seems that nothing happened between me and Natalia back then, right? Why do you feel guilty about being caught by your wife? Natalia narrowed her eyes and questioned her soul. How did you let go of such a good opportunity just now? This question is very difficult, and if you can't answer it well, you may be suspected of Lu Shahui. She's drunk, I can't take advantage of her. The gentleman replied. I love you, no matter how beautiful other women are, I won't take another look at them. The scumbag version replied. When we met for the first time 10 years ago, fate connected us together. For so many years, I have been thinking about you all the time. How can other vulgar fans get into my eyes? Standard soap opera answer. However, Thor had an idea and blurted out, a boiled duck cannot fly. A dead version of the answer. Natalia stared at Thor, her face clouded. Thor, who had a burst of desire to survive, suddenly sat upright, covered his heart with one hand, and pressed the widow's face with the other, and said affectionately, I once had a sincere love in front of me, but I didn't cherish it. It's too late to regret. The most painful thing in the world is this. Hearing this affectionate confession suddenly, Natalia's face turned rosy instantly, and the tenderness in her eyes almost dripped out. Thornton breathed a sigh of relief, and continued, if God can give me another chance, I will say 3 words to that girl, I love you. If I have to add a time limit to this love, I hope it is 10,000 years. The last half sentence was not said by Thor, but the widow sneered. Unfortunately, I went to HK for a mission a few years ago and watched a movie. Thor couldn't help but want to slap himself. Looking at this face that had lost its youthfulness, Thor sighed, and suddenly put his arms around Natalia. Natalia froze, but soon relaxed again. Little girl, I know you are angry. I shouldn't have left you for so long. I don't blame you. At the beginning, I did deliberately use some small tricks to leave a deep impression on Natalia, who was still a child. Deep impression. This title seemed to hit Natalia's memory. She stared blankly at Thor, her eye circles starting to turn red. She lowered her head suddenly, and then raised her head with a bright smile on her face, as if nothing happened just now. So sad, what are you doing? Isn't it a good thing to meet again? It's like parting from life to death. Glancing at Thor, he said softly, you don't need to apologize, you have helped me a lot. Without you, I don't know what I would be like now. I haven't come to see me in these years, I know you must have you things to do. Maybe tomorrow, you have other things to be busy, so now. Don't talk, kiss me. The next morning, when Thor walked into S.H.I.E.L.D. holding Natalia's hand, many agents stared straight. Natalia's charm is unparalleled, and it is impossible for no one to be tempted. But all the suitors never got a response. especially since she sent several stalking suitors to the emergency room. Black Widow's name was completely established, and no one dared to provoke her again. Seeing Thor's intimacy with her, S.H.I.E.L.D. howled. In the director's office, Nick Fury said with a helpless face, "You have found so many things for me as soon as you came back. Now it is estimated that 80% of the male agents regard you as the enemy of life." Thor looked indifferent. "It's just a bunch of licking dogs, don't worry about them." Nick Fury put away his joking thoughts and asked seriously, "Okay, I need to know your purpose. What do you think about General Ross's research?" He definitely wouldn't think that Thor would be so bored that he would send someone to act with him, just to pick up girls, and the most likely thing that might attract him is the military's research. Thor nodded. "The military seems to be studying the super soldier plan now. I am a little interested in some of them, and maybe I can give them a little help." Nick Fury said helplessly, "Since it's a cooperation, you can definitely ask S.H.I.E.L.D. to help negotiate. What exactly do you want? Super soldier serum formula?" "No." Thor shook his head. "The military's formula is not perfect at all. Even if it succeeds, it won't be like Steve Rogers. The bigger possibility is to create an uncontrollable monster. His goal is Hulk, an unrepeatable accidental product. In the previous life, Banner's so-called acceptance of Hulk, the so-called combination of strength and wisdom, actually wasted Hulk's potential at all. Without it, there would be anger and rage. Even with Hulk's power, there would be no Hulk's deterrence anymore. Moreover, becoming Dr. Hulk, the huge body can't even wear anti-Hulk armor, the price is too high. As one of the most powerful combat power, naturally it can't be wasted like this." Nick Fury's eyes widened. "You already knew the result." Then he slapped his thigh. "I almost forgot, you were raised by a witch and can predict the future." Then he picked up the phone, just pressed a few numbers, then hung up suddenly, slapped the table angrily and said, "That guy is just a stubborn old man, he doesn't pay attention to S.H.I.E.L.D. at all, and he will do nothing but ridicule him. It won't happen." Then he looked at Thor. Thor spread his hands. "You don't need to stop it, and you can't stop it. And although his research is bound to cause problems, it is indeed beneficial to one of your plans." "Good for me." Nick Fury thought for a while and thought, "You mean, the Avengers plan? You even know about this?" This was the plan he initially formulated after Carol left. It was originally called the Asgardian plan, and he didn't tell anyone about it. Pass. He thought about it. "You mean, the monster created by the failed experiment will become a member of the Avengers in the future?" "God, how many potential Avengers do you know?" "A lot, but most of them will probably never show up if they are said." "So, are you sure you want to listen?" Thor is telling the truth. Many small changes will cause big changes, just like when he came to lie on the earth on a whim, it inadvertently caused a great impact later. Taking Maya Hansen away reversed the ending of Iron Man's death, throwing a hammer at random changed Natalia's trajectory. But all my actions have been carefully considered. Maya Hansen has little influence on the main plot. Natalia will join S.H.I.E.L.D. sooner or later. But S.H.I.E.L.D. is different. At this point in time, the superhero is as much a source of danger to many as the intruder. This is why the infamous Sokovia Act came about. Once restrictive measures are taken in advance, some superheroes are likely to be strangled in the cradle. Nick Fury understood what he meant and shook his head. He has seen terrible threats in the universe, so he does not want to lose any superhero because of him. In fact, in his plan, there are already several candidates, but he lacks a leader. Although Thor is very strong, he obviously won't stay on Earth for long. "Okay, let's not talk about the old days." Thor interrupted his contemplation. He came to S.H.I.E.L.D. to confirm something. "Think of a way, let me meet Agent Peggy Carter." Walking out of the office, Natalia took Thor back to the car, and S.H.I.E.L.D. temporarily arranged a residence and an identity for him. "I will be the Avenger you say, right?" Natalia asked quietly. Thor couldn't help but sigh. This is a very smart woman, and she heard a lot from the conversation between herself and Braised Egg. He joked, "Why, do you think I saw your potential and treated you so well on purpose?" Natalia didn't speak, just looked at him straight. Thor whispered, "Whether I intervene or not, you are destined to embark on the road of superhero and become one of the greatest Avengers. And what I saved and helped was Natalia, not Black Widow." Natalia was silent, and asked after a long time, "In the future, my death will be valuable, isn't it?" Thor's heart skipped a beat, so sharp. Yes, when everyone gave up, you were the only one who persisted. In the end, your persistence turned around. You sacrificed yourself and saved 3.5 billion people. Thor suppressed his emotions as much as possible and spoke calmly. At first, he didn't really care about such an ordinary mortal. Even as a member of the Avengers, he was more responsible for some auxiliary work. Until her tragic and insignificant ending, she was forgotten in a foreign land alone. At the final memorial service, it was Iron Man who was remembered. But that is no longer your future, nor is it the future I want. The trajectory of your destiny changed as early as the moment we met. Yeah, Natalia smiled, and she raised the Hercules bracelet on her hand. I didn't have you in my future, at most it was just a comrade in arms and a partner. But now I have it. The temporary residence Shield arranged for him was a very delicate villa, and the identity of the arrangement was a high-level agent. When he came to the residence, Thor planned to keep Natalia behind with the cheek, but when he saw Maya Hansen at the door waiting for him to come back, Natalia smiled meaningfully and left. Who is she? Maya Hansen looked wary. Originally, the straight girl of steel was not that sensitive. The problem is, Natalia is so beautiful, even as a woman, I can't help being moved, this opponent is too high. Thor patted her on the head, and said angrily, what are you thinking about? Do you remember the little girl before we left? She has grown up and is now the top 10th level agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Maya Hansen said clearly, your vision is still so good. 10 years ago, you could see that a little girl would grow up to be so outstanding. By the way, you came to tease me on purpose back then, because you saw the potential of extremists, right? Quote. Thor said seriously, I can often see a person's future potential, so I can do some things in advance and make some layouts. Natalia is the same, and so are you. In fact, Betty Ross is also. Although she is a soy sauce in the movie, she has the potential to become a female Hulk. The topic changed, and he continued, but you have to understand that I have principles. If I don't really have a crush on you, even if I meet the future savior, I won't betray my beauty. PFF'd, the shameless words immediately ruined the atmosphere, and Maya Hansen said angrily, if you can speak seriously, I can really treat you as a Prince Charming. And don't forget, when we were together, you were already It's a Fat House, how can there be any beauty? The weird atmosphere was swept away, and the two finally relaxed and chatted about their respective affairs. Last night, Maya Hansen went back to her former hometown. It's a pity that after so many years, things have changed. Maya Hansen, who had no relatives or friends, couldn't even find a single acquaintance. Even her disappearance that year did not cause the slightest disturbance. Definitely, this is also due to the intervention of S.H.I.E.L.D. Otherwise, the disappearance of a person for no reason, even a well-known botanist, will always cause a sensation. As for Thor's whereabouts last night, she didn't hide it from her. After so many years, Maya Hansen has long been used to it. After all, as the prince of God's domain, Asgard has a large group of coquettish sluts who want to hug this thigh. On the dim seat, two young figures cuddled together and whispered. When I left last night, I left a note with contact information. Betty Ross fell asleep with a hangover until noon today, and then called in the afternoon. She first expressed her apology for being drunk last night, and then asked him to go to the movies tonight. Betty Ross chose a new movie called Alice vs. Zombies. Generally, when a man and a woman who have just met each other watch a movie, if the boy chooses a horror movie, it will definitely be regarded as having bad intentions. And the woman's doing so is often a hint of further communication. Girls are often privileged in this regard. Gas, shaking, cold. As the majestic god of thunder, Thor definitely won't be afraid of mere zombies, things that fall down with a hammer. Anyway, where is my hammer? Mjolnir in the New Mexico crater, meow meow. But Betty Ross is different. She still can't see the iron-blooded ability of General Ross in her young body, and she is often so scared that she hugs Thor. After watching the movie, they returned to Betty Ross's house, and the two drank some wine together. Betty Ross didn't drink much tonight and stayed sober. With a flushed face, she pulled Thor and breathed Rulin, if you leave again tonight, I will wonder if you like men. Thornton felt a burst of excitement, could it be that? All right for tonight. Just then, there was an untimely knock on the door. Who is that? It was not only Thor who was disturbed, but also Betty Ross. She was very helpless and depressed. Tonight, she finally mustered up the courage. A somewhat hoarse female voice sounded outside the door. "I'm looking for a Mr. Thor, is he there?" Betty Ross was taken aback for a moment, and suddenly looked puzzled. Thor was also stunned. He didn't tell others where he was going tonight. Maya Hansen was busy making up for the changes in the earth over the years. The only one who can guess her whereabouts is Natalia, so the identity of the person outside the door. Thor walked to the door with a helpless expression. With a squeak, the door opened. The people outside the door stared blankly at Betty Ross in the living room, staring wide-eyed. "Who opened the door just now?" This is a hall full of strong Oriental style, surrounded by piano, chess, calligraphy and paintings. At the moment it was noon, and the sun shone in through the window, warming my body. For a moment, Thor thought he had traveled through time again. He was still at Betty Ross's house just now, opening the door for an uninvited guest who disturbed the good things. Unexpectedly, the moment the door was opened, a golden halo appeared under the feet, and then the floor was empty. It was dark before his eyes, and then he opened his eyes, and he had already come here. Looking at the white egg in front of him. "Oh, it should be a white woman with a bald head," Thor said. "I was brought here for no reason. Is this how Kamar Taj treats guests?" 9 of the 10 bald heads are strong, and 1 is a stewed egg. The monk-robed woman in front of her is none other than the bald-headed Chang, the current sorcerer supreme of Kamar Taj, the Asgardian of Earth, the master of Ancient One. Leaving aside the big bald head, Ancient One is actually a British beauty with a mysterious aura all over her body. Ancient One poured him a cup of tea with his own hands, and said, "Thor Odinson, I observed you a long time ago, since 1995. Thor's heart skipped a beat. 95 years. Isn't it the time I traveled through? I have been monitoring those people and things from other worlds, because they may be potential threats to this world." Ancient One continued. "Wait," Thor interrupted, "but in fact, I am not from another world." The Ancient One magician nodded slightly. "Yes, you are the son of Odin, you are indeed from this world. However, 10 years ago, a strange change occurred in your soul, you disappeared for an instant, and then returned. Although this process is very short, but I still feel it. Can you tell me where your soul is going?" Thor thought for a while, and said seriously, "You can understand it as a parallel world." Ancient One nodded slightly, but didn't go into it. She continued. "Since then, the timeline of this world seems to have shifted. At first I was puzzled, but later I discovered that all the shifts point to you. It is my duty to protect the Earth from other latitudes." Thor suddenly felt a burst of vigilance. At this time, Ancient One is as powerful as the peak Odin. If he wants to do something to himself, he is definitely not an opponent. And more importantly, Kamar Taj blocked Heimdall's sight, so he couldn't summon Bifrost himself. Ancient One didn't do anything. She asked slowly, "Why do you want to change the trajectory of history? Every timeline has its own fixed trajectory. Forcibly changing the trajectory of time is a violation of natural law, breaking the rules. Sooner or later there will be a price to be paid, our world will be turned upside down and millions will suffer." "Ha ha ha," Thor suddenly laughed. "But as a sorcerer supreme, you also did not obey the rules. In the future, your successors will also break the rules to fight against Dormammu. The Ancient One magician has some Dormammu's power in him. Others don't know it, but Thor knows it. Perhaps in your opinion, this is all to maintain the timeline you know. Therefore, you can accept your own death and the betrayal of Modu magician. But I can't. I won't accept my family being killed, my people will be slaughtered, my homeland will be destroyed in Ragnarok, and Natalia will die in space. If the future must be like this, then this kind of future is not worth it." Ancient One was silent for a while Thor was secretly vigilant, thinking of a way to break the situation. After a long time, Ancient One raised his head and suddenly smiled. "You're right." Chapter 31. What, is it strange? Ancient One couldn't help asking, looking at Thor in a daze. "Yes, you have told me your responsibilities, but you let me do it. I thought you would choose to bring this timeline back on track." Thor said frankly. He really did not expect that Ancient One would be so easily persuaded. He was ready to fight to the death. He didn't doubt Ancient One's strategy of delaying the attack. Ancient One's strength and identity simply didn't bother to do so. The strong have their pride, just like Thanos has committed numerous crimes in the universe, but he never lies. Ancient One patiently explained to him, what has happened cannot be changed, even if I am an Asgardian from Eye of Agamotto. At most, I can only start from now, restrict you, and guarantee the future direction. Then why? Because the future has changed. Before you came, I used the Eye of Agamotto to observe the direction of the future thousands of times, some for better and some for worse. And in the branch where I stop you, there is no good ending. Once I force you, you are even more dangerous than Dormammu. With a swipe of Ancient One, a golden circle appeared. Some pictures began to appear inside, like a movie. It's already one of the better ones. In the picture, Ancient One traps Thor with a mirror image, seals the memory brought by time travel, and uses Time Gem to return his strength to 1995. But when the memory was about to be reset, an orange light flashed past. The last Infinite Gems experience coupon, Soul Gem, create an indistinguishable soul that is exactly the same as the target, generated at a specified location, at an optional time and place. Valid for 1 minute. The effect of tasteless, but it took effect at this time. The picture continues to advance, seeing the invasion of the Dark Elves, seeing Ragnarok, seeing Infinity War, the exact same process as in memory, and the soul created by Soul Gem has been missing for a long time. It seems to have disappeared until. This is a world with beautiful mountains and rivers. Thanos tremblingly picked a fruit from the ground, put it in a bag, and walked into the room with a limping. Every step was accompanied by heavy panting. Boiled a pot of hot soup, drank it in one gulp, regained some strength, and walked to the door instead, watching the rising sun. Finally, it is time to rest and watch the sunrise with the gratitude of the universe. Raising my left hand, looking at the 6 hard-won gems, worries arose in my heart. The universe needs to be corrected, after which the gems are useless, just temptation. A faint figure appeared. It was the Avenger who chopped him down. Without looking up, Thanos whispered, "This time, you can behead." The figure didn't make a move, but said without emotion, "If half of the life is wiped out, can the other half prosper? That's impossible. As long as there are people who still care about the past, they will never be able to accept the future, and they will definitely rebel. If you want to truly achieve your goal, you must turn this universe into atomic dust. Then, create a new universe. The life there has no resentment for loss, only gratitude for giving, a universe that knows how to be grateful." Quote. After saying this, the figure disappeared, leaving Thanos there thinking. After a long time, he finally stood up, his eyes regained his firmness. "Let me bear this crime alone." The lonely figure stood on this land, looking a little desolate. He stretched out his hand, snapped his fingers with a snap. "I am destiny." The screen disappears, and Thor is dumbfounded. Blacken is 10 times stronger. The ancients do not deceive me. I am such an honest person. It is said that in a certain 7-point scale, the IQ is only 2 points, once Blacken can be so good. With a smug smile, Thor turned his head to look at Ancient One. "Okay, the movie was well shot. But since you don't intend to embarrass me, why did you bring me here, just to chat with me?" Ancient One shook his head, and said slowly, "A long time ago, I noticed that there was something wrong with this timeline, and some openings could not be closed normally. Your mutation 12 years ago made this feeling even more obvious. For a long time, I have not been able to find the reason. Until recently, I did not understand that the key to this loophole lies in you. You are the only one who can fix the loophole. Once the problem of the timeline breaks out, the consequences are much more serious than changing the future. When the timeline of this world cannot be connected into a complete line, then the entire circuit may collapse. So, I found you and asked you to help restore time. I don't think you want to lose everything you own, do you?" Thor nodded. "Although I don't understand the previous technical terms, I still understand the last sentence." "Okay, how can I help you?" "Relax and accept the power of the Eye of Agamotto." On Ancient One's chest, a dazzling green light flashed. Wait. Suddenly remembering Thor, who hadn't explained anything at home, before he could say the last sentence, he lost consciousness. "Hey, congratulations to the host for triggering the Ancient One's exclusive mission. Eternal secret, with the help of Dormammu's dark power, Ancient One has achieved immortality. Help Ancient One, maybe you can understand the mystery. Mission objective. Complete the repair of the time loophole. Mission reward. Active skill, immortality. Immortality. It has eternal lifespan, will not age, and can actively use it on other targets whose strength level is lower than that of the host, and bestow the power of immortality. If the target's strength is too strong, it cannot be used. As soon as he regained consciousness, Thor heard a prompt from the system. Seeing the word, eternal life, I was so excited that I almost cried out. Eternal life, through the ages, the dreams of many races. Even if he is as strong as Odin and Ancient One, he can't do it, but he wants to achieve it. Unfortunately, this task is difficult to complete at first glance. Done with bug fixes. Does Ancient One Magician regard itself as an antivirus software? Just click a one-click repair. Thor was bewildered. Then, where is this? I was still in the Kamartaj Hall just now. Why did I come to this street in the blink of an eye? Where did Ancient One lose itself? And this street looks too backward, like the old society. He took out his mobile phone and took a look. Yaosho, what the hell is this place? Asgard's high-tech mobile phone has no signal. In a nearby alley, there was a sudden sound of fighting. This place doesn't seem to be law and order, there are people fighting in broad daylight. Thor wasn't so nosy at first, but now he was in a bad mood after being tricked by Ancient One, so he was going to find someone to beat him up to vent his anger. In the alley, it was not so much a fight as a bullying of a 1.8-meter strong man against a 1.9-meter short man. The short man got up from the ground, picked up a round trash can lid to block in front of him, but was pulled off by the opponent, threw it aside, and punched him again, knocking him down to the ground. The tall man was about to step on it when he was suddenly pulled back. Looking back, a blond man was smiling at him. Stop beating, have some quality. Don't force me to slap you. Typical fuel to the fire. If you are cowardly, where will you put your face? None of your business. He punched the door in the face, and then found that the other party was gone. While he was in a daze, there was a burst of force on his face. With a bang, the whole person was thrown into the air, and then another punch was aimed at the other cheek. Bang bang bang, the sound of fists hitting the flesh continued continuously. At the entrance of the alley, a young man in an army uniform stared dumbfounded at a 170-pound strong man who was hit by an infinite uppercut without falling to the ground. With the last punch, the strong man lay on the side like a dead dog. The thin young man on the ground got up and muttered, I almost knocked him down just now. Then he turned to look at Thor. Thank you anyway. My name is Steve Rogers, what about you? A young man from outside the alley ran in, helped Steve Rogers up, looked at his injuries, and then turned around and said, Thanks, buddy, my name is James Barnes, usually you can just call me Bucky, thank you for helping Steve Rogers teach the fool a lesson. Thor was stunned, he finally understood that he was sent to 1942 by Ancient One with the power of Time Gem. This year has been a rough year for the United States. On the one hand, the German Hans offensive reached its peak, and the power of one country drove several countries to fight. On the other hand, the little devil exploded the old Americans' chrysanthemum at Pearl Harbor a few months ago, and the United States, which has been in the theater mode, finally couldn't sit still living. So, the loophole in the timeline happened in this period. From the looks of it, the thin man in front of him is naturally the future Captain America. This afternoon, he was once again refused to join the army. Asthma, scarlet fever, heart disease, high blood pressure. The recruiter even wondered how the poor boy survived to this day. Don't look at how bright and upright Captain America is in the movie. In fact, this guy is quite dishonest, and has tried to join the army with forged identities and times. Thinking back, at the point in time in the future, my name did not appear during World War II, so. Donald Blake, you're welcome. I hate this kind of trash who is strong but dare not go to the front line and hides in the back to do his best. Thor made a name and shook hands with them. It's not really nonsense. Seeing the scraps of paper scattered on the ground, it was the notice of rejection of Steve's enlistment. Bucky said helplessly, Hey, although identification is not so authentic these days, it's a dangerous thing for you to keep forging your identity and trying to join the army repeatedly, and it's illegal. Steve pouted, disapprovingly. Bucky had no choice but to change the subject and said to Thor, Dude, there's tomorrow's World Expo tonight, the three of us go to visit together. Thor agreed. Anyway, the mission has no clue yet. I have to say that the relationship between Bucky and Steve is really good. While attending the expo, he also helped Steve date 2 girls. Although with Steve's height and straight male attributes, it is likely that there will be no drama. Thor was wandering around, thinking about his mission ideas. There is a problem with the timeline of this era, and it is likely to involve Captain America, but he thought of one thing. It is said that when Captain America returned the gem at the end, he stayed in the 40s for the last stop, completed his date with Peggy Carter, and spent a lifetime with her. Then in this world, there will be a hidden old Captain America. But if he prevents the flickering incident, then Captain America will have no chance to travel through time and space, which will form a conflict. The purpose of meeting Peggy Carter was to verify the existence of the old Captain America. Maybe this is a time loophole. Drip, congratulations to the host for discovering the branch of the mission, the eternal secret. Complete the mission after completing all the branches. Branch 1. Block the future passage of Captain America from the route, and maintain the timeline where the host is located. Branch 2. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Branch 3. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Blocking Captain America from crossing. So, in the timeline I'm in, the old Captain America doesn't exist. Since we want to block it from the route, we have to start with the motivation that Captain America traversed. Peggy Carter. Thor looked at Steve and Bucky not far away, and smiled. Captain America, women are big pigs, Winter Soldier is your thing. I am doing this for your own good. The smile gradually changed, and an idea gradually took shape. In another parallel world, the story of Captain America has no heroine, and the only CP is Bucky. It is said that at one point, Captain America asked Bucky to help keep the ring, and Bucky put it on. Another time, Bucky was injured, but Captain America didn't hold him up like in the movie, but with a princess hug. It is said that there was a selection in the previous life, where Marvel's favorite pair of CPs were selected regardless of gender, and Dundong ranked first. All in all, a good friend and a quilt. Ah bah, it's a lifetime. Dundong is an iron friend, and Peggy Carter is like a mistress. This morning, the doctor who was examining Steve was suddenly called out at some conscription office, leaving Steve alone. Glancing at the falsification of military volunteer form written on the wall, Steve panicked. In the past, every time the inspection was completed, it was directly rejected, and I never felt sorry for him. In fact, the conscription office didn't bother to take care of such a trivial matter. Is it going to be over today? This kind of thing can be big or small, if you are locked up for 10 or 8 years. Especially when a serious-looking soldier drew the curtain and walked in, Steve felt that he was already cold. At this time, an old man from the Mediterranean came in, motioned for the soldiers to go out, and then had a straightforward conversation, and Steve's answer satisfied him. The old man finally said, "Let me introduce myself, I am Dr. Abraham Erskine, and I can give you a chance. I just need one chance." At this time, a voice sounded outside, "Is the doctor there? I'll sign up." Dr. Abraham nodded to the soldiers, and a blond young man was brought in. "Mr. Black, you joined the army too?" Steve greeted. "Hey, I've passed." The result of the examination was naturally passed, and the almost perfect physical measurement data made Dr. Abraham decide to include him in that team. If the character passes the test, it may be the second candidate for the super soldier serum. The young man who came in was definitely Thor. "Since you're going to help Bucky watch Captain America, try to join him on the same team as possible." He watched the conscription office where Captain America entered early in the morning, and after seeing Dr. Abraham enter, he waited for a few minutes before following him in. The physique of the Asgard people is far superior to that of mortals, not to mention Thor is a royal family, that is the body of the god who once fought Thanos head-on. Even the strengthened Captain America is no match for him. In order not to cause a sensation, he has suppressed his physical condition as much as possible. If it weren't for worrying about attracting the attention of this era itself and causing unnecessary variables, the power of thunder alone would be enough to destroy any army. Soon, Thor and Steve appeared in the barracks wearing brown military uniforms. Thor and Steve sit next to each other. Steve may still think it's nice to have a good friend standing beside him, but he doesn't mind standing next to Thor, who is 1.9 meters tall. His thin body is more conspicuous. A heroic female officer walked in front of them with graceful steps. The curly hair matched with the flame-like lipstick adds a bit of charm. A rude soldier flirted with her, and was instantly beaten by her. The other muttered a few words desperately, and then lay down in less than 3 seconds. The recruits fell silent for a moment. What the hell, this woman is so fierce. Except Steve and Thor. The former was still in a daze stupidly, while the latter looked at her with great interest. Future legendary agent, Peggy Carter. Peggy Carter glanced, and immediately discovered the cutest height difference between Thor and Steve. Seeing Peggy's gaze turn, Thor gave her his trademark smirk and winked at her. This beautiful lady, I wonder if I am lucky enough to invite you to have a glass of red wine with me tonight. Seeing this scene, Steve felt as if something was moving away from him, but he didn't know what it was. He frowned, but recovered quickly. Well, what are you thinking so much about? With that time, why not think more about Bucky? He should already be on the battlefield, right? Hey, congratulations to the host for completing the task. Eternal Secret, Branch 1, blocking the future Captain America from the source, and maintaining the timeline where the host is located. In that instant, possible future developments for Captain America and Page had been cut off. The task is very simple to complete, but the follow-up is very troublesome. Peggy Carter had a smile in her eyes. Good idea. Wait for me here after training tonight. I think this will be an unforgettable night. Although the voice was very gentle, even honest Steve shuddered, and the other recruits were already mourning for Thor. Is it too late for me to refuse now? Just trying to get some attention, so Steve and Carter don't see eye to eye. This is a character at the level of an old lady, really not my style. Thor subconsciously ignored that he was also at the ancestor level. Okay, boys, let's talk about the date in the evening. A middle-aged officer exuding a fierce temperament came up and joked. Colonel Phillips. Peggy was the first to salute, also reminding the recruits. Glancing at the recruits, Phillips began his speech. General Barton once said that war is fought with arms, but victory depends on soldiers. We win wars because we have the best soldiers. Quote. He glanced at Steve. What the hell? How did something strange get mixed in? Phillips felt bad for a moment, and he glanced at the expressionless Dr. Abraham. Bad old man, very bad. He tried hard to control the corners of his twitching mouth, and continued his opening remarks. The Institute of Strategic Science is an organization that brings together the best scientists and talents from allied countries and the entire free world. Our goal is to create the most powerful legion. The legion is composed of soldiers. So this selection is the selection and training conducted by this institute to train super soldiers. After a simple speech, it is training. Without any surprise, Steve won the first place in each project, the last one, although he worked very hard. On the contrary, Thor is far ahead in almost every item, almost reaching the highest record in the barracks. Phillips even suspects the guy's Superman in his underwear. After inquiring, it turned out that both of them were stuffed in by Dr. Abraham. Bad old man, slipping away. On the training ground a few days later, the recruits are training. How about the people I brought? Dr. Abraham asked Phillips. Well, Phillips nodded in satisfaction. Brave, strong, flexible, and able to adapt to all kinds of high-intensity training. If you decide to choose him, I have no objection. Peggy Carter interjected. I have reservations. This guy has all the characteristics of a soldier. You should pay attention to how many times he has fought in the past few days. Oh, Miss Carter, you can't have a bad impression of him just because he dove you that night. After all, everyone knows that you kept him to deal with him. As for fighting, every Hodge took the initiative to provoke once. Then, seeing Dr. Abraham's strange expression, he suddenly confirmed in a low voice, Doctor, are you talking about that black? No, I'm talking about Steve. Phillips slapped his head. Don't tell me you're looking for an experimental mouse, even Hodge is much better than him. I even think of him as Black's addition. The doctor shrugged and said, Blake is indeed very good. In fact, if there is no Steve, I will choose him. The reason why I choose Steve is that I value qualities other than physical fitness. As for Hodge, I think his character needs to be tested. I've seen him bully Steve many times. He pointed at the crowd, and Hodge was picking on Steve, before getting knocked down by Thor. We're going to fight again. Peggy Carter cursed and stepped up to stop it. Colonel Phillips said lightly, War has never been based on convincing people with virtue, but on courage. As he spoke, He took a grenade from the item box, pulled out the insurance, and threw it into the group of recruits. Grenade. Shit. The soldiers were shocked and fled in all directions. Among them, the strong Hodge took the lead and quickly rolled to the back of a jeep. Little did he know that he had lost an opportunity forever. Among the crowd, only 3 people did not escape. One is Steve. He rushed against the flow of people and threw himself on the grenade, with fear on his face, but he still held the grenade tightly and shouted, "Go away! Go away!" The other 2. Peggy wanted to rush up and kick the grenade into the nearby open space, but before taking 2 steps, Thor rushed up to her with open arms, threw her down, and shouted, "Grenade, lie down." The grenade did not explode for a long time, and everyone finally reacted slowly. At this time, Phillips shouted, "It's an imitation. Line up, get back." Steve said coldly, "Is this a test?" The doctor smiled triumphantly, and Phillips was finally convinced. This thin soldier has some of the most valuable and rarest qualities as a soldier sacrifice. With a bit of embarrassment on his face, he said stiffly, "He's still too thin." Then he turned his head to look at Thor and Peggy, who were still in a daze, and said with black lines on his face, "Does this kid really think of himself as a Superman? It's so close, it's useless to lie down." The doctor shrugged. "Probably yes, it's written like this in comics. But at least, if it's a real grenade, Peggy can survive under the pressure. Therefore, I choose him as the second candidate." Quote. The soldiers obviously noticed this scene, and all of them blew their whistles to death. Peggy Carter's face turned red and pale, but unexpectedly she didn't get angry, but pushed her lightly, and said in a low voice, "You, get up first." Thornton felt a pain in his egg. Just now, he saw Peggy Carter running towards the grenade against the flow of people, and he had a subconscious conditioned reflex. Dead man wow. If Steve's behavior in the original book is a small stone that can cause ripples in Peggy Carter's heart, then Thor threw in a boulder this time and set off waves, and the ripples are even more irrelevant up. Steve's performance completely silenced those who originally had objections. "Why did you choose me?" he asked Dr. Abraham that in his dorm room the night before the Super Soldier Project. "Because, rather than being a good soldier, I want you to be a good man." Actually, Steve had some hesitation. Black might be a better choice. Although he knew that this might be his only chance, he still brought it up. The doctor was taken aback for a moment, and then became more satisfied. He smiled and said, "Yes, Black is indeed the best soldier I have ever seen. He is brave and firm, defying the strong and sympathizing with the weak. However, compared to you, he is too irritable and aggressive. Provocative, but his excitement when he fights cannot be hidden." The doctor joked, "He gives me the same feeling as a Spartan." Definitely, as a soldier, these are not disadvantages but advantages. However, Super Soldier Serum will infinitely magnify a person's personality characteristics. And you, humility, integrity, compassion, sacrifice, the qualities you possess are what I need most. Sounds like a nice selection. Do I have to swear an oath tomorrow? Steve laughed too. Because of Thor's disruption, Steve took Dr. Abraham's car to the experimental base the next day, while Thor sat in Peggy Carter's passenger seat. As Colonel Phillips' favorite soldier, Abraham agrees to select Steve as the second super soldier after his successful trial. Therefore, Thor is eligible to visit in advance. In fact, Thor knows that with his own strength, the super soldier serum has basically no effect on him. Also, Captain America will only have one. How do you feel? Are you disappointed not to be the first super soldier? Peggy broke the weird atmosphere. Since the embarrassing incident on the training ground, she ordered everyone not to speak out, and never let it be mentioned. But facing Thor, it was still a little embarrassing. That's not true. It's Steve who participated in front of me. If it's him, I have no problem. Besides, don't you think I'm very good even without strengthening? Peggy Carter nodded incredulously. Fighting twice in 3 days in the barracks is not for everyone, and it's still a group of fights. Tell me about your past. What did you do before? I don't believe that such a good skill would be an ordinary doctor. Thor's fake identity is a doctor in a small clinic, and it can be found out that it is fake. It's just that in this age, most people choose to turn a blind eye. Did you see it? I used to be a hunter in Alaska, and I hunted brown bears twice in 3 days. Peggy Carter rolled her eyes. In the laboratory, Thor looked at Steve, who was about to step onto the laboratory bench, and joked, "How is it? Are you nervous?" Steve nodded. "It's a bit, but it's my job," he said, took off his shirt under the doctor's instruction, and lay down on the laboratory table. Seeing Steve's rib bone figure, Thor couldn't help but secretly took a few photos, waiting to show him his black history in the future. Numerous needles plunged into Steve's body, injecting the drug into the muscles, and the bench slowly closed. Howard Stark, who was in charge of mechanical equipment, turned on the power. 10%, 20%, 30%. The experimenter read out the data on the meter. The light inside the test bench became more and more dazzling, and outsiders could no longer see Steve inside. Only Thor hasn't seen it yet, and Steve is clenching his teeth to keep himself from grunting. 40%, 50%. An experimenter next to him added. The discipline of heart rate increased, but the vital signs were basically stable. This has surpassed all previous experimenters. Thor glanced at the government personnel next to Howard Stark. This guy's eyes were cloudy. If he guessed right, this guy is actually Hydra. It's just that all the attention is on Steve, and no one is paying attention to him. Howard thought Thor was looking at him, so he explained. It is said that the pain of 30% dose is similar to that of childbirth, and the pain of 40% dose is equivalent to broken eggs. Everyone has black lines on their faces. How the hell do you know so clearly? Have you ever had a baby? No. Have you been kicked? Thornton couldn't help laughing. As expected of Tony Stark's father, he looked gentle, but he was actually a slut. It's a pity that he was assassinated early. At this time, the sound of the system suddenly jumped out. Drip. Congratulations to the host for discovering the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 2. Complete all the branches to complete the mission. Branch 1. Completed. Sideline 2. Save Howard Stark from dying at the hands of the Winter Soldier in the future. Branch 3. Not unlocked, please explore by yourself. Before he had time to think about it, the dose over there reached 60%, and Steve finally couldn't help but let out a scream. Ah. Howard stopped increasing the dose, and Dr. Abraham asked eagerly, "Steve, how? If it doesn't work, I will stop immediately." If this noble young man fell on the laboratory table, he would never forgive himself. "Don't stop, I can stand it," Steve yelled through gritted teeth. 70%, 80%, 90%. The screams became louder and louder, as if they would collapse in the next moment. Howard stopped and looked at the doctor. The doctor asked anxiously, "Steve, how is it? Is it okay?" But apart from the screams, he couldn't hear other sounds. The doctor ordered helplessly, "Stop." "Wait," Thor interrupted him loudly, "he can, go on." He could see what was going on inside, and Steve still demanded to continue, but he couldn't speak anymore. So he stops the doctor from interrupting, and even uses the bonus skill from the original Loki mission. Master of Lies. When you make a statement, it is easier for the other party to believe it. To ensure success, he even threw in some black magic. This is what he learned from Frigga. Although he is not as proficient as Loki, it is enough for mortals. In the eyes of everyone, Howard increased the dose for the last time. 100%. The experimental cabin slowly opened, and a robust figure appeared in front of everyone amidst the smog. Steve, who stepped off the laboratory bench, can be said to have become another person except for his head. He was originally 1.6 meters tall, but he was almost a foot taller. And the muscles that explode all over the body are simply a mini version of Hulk. "How do you feel?" Thor asked. "It feels great, now I can play against anyone all day." There was warm applause from the audience. People came up, and no one noticed except Dr. Abraham. The Hydra spy pulled out a lighter. Abraham was startled, but before he could react, there was a bang explosion, and the laboratory was in chaos. Before everyone had time to react, the Hydra spy grabbed the remaining tube of serum, shot Dr. Abraham and ran away. Thor pulled him past him, out of the way, and fell to the ground. Steve ran up quickly, and the doctor shouted, "I'm fine, go after me." Steve rushed out quickly. The spy just got into a car, and before he could close the door, he was grabbed and dragged out by Steve, so scared that he ran away and took off his coat in an instant. Originally, with Captain America's physical fitness, he could be easily caught, but on the one hand, the newly remodeled Captain America could not adapt to his own strength, and on the other hand, he had to worry about the safety of the public, so the two chased and fled all the way. On the pier, a child was held hostage, and he jumped off the pier and got into the prepared submarine. Just when he thought he had completed the task, a pair of arms stronger than his thighs shattered the window with a bang, grabbed him out, threw him onto the pier, and quickly jumped out to hold him down. Seeing that he couldn't escape, the spy smashed the serum into pieces and shouted, "Chop off one head, and grow two more. Hydra hail." Immediately, he tilted his head and died. The surrounding melon eaters cheered excitedly. In this era, a hero is needed too much. The next day, Captain America's heroic deeds were published by major media. And another bad news came. Dr. Abraham temporarily forgot the formula of the serum due to injury and excessive shock. Phillips is annoyed that he wants an invincible army, not just one man, even though Captain America has shown his strength. After the hard-working Captain America had no choice but to have his blood sampled, he began to participate in various catwalk events and was regarded as a mascot. And the best black recruit, Thor, was soon sent to the front. It was a pity for Phillips. If he had been chosen in the first place, he might be able to protect the doctor immediately after undergoing the transformation, or recover the potion. No one doubts Thor, because many people know that he is the default second super soldier. Once the plan is terminated, he will lose the most. "Oh, I'm sorry, Doctor," Thor murmured to himself the night before heading to the front. For him, the effect of the super soldier serum is almost non-existent, but the side effects are not small, so there is no need for him to take risks to change history. Saving Dr. Abraham is already the limit. The doctor's amnesia is naturally due to Thor's black magic. During the 5 years in Asgard, in addition to eating fat, he read a lot of classics and learned a few simple magic. He wouldn't let the super soldier project go ahead, even if he didn't care about the plot. The character of Dr. Abraham and Steve is unquestionable, but not everyone is so noble. Once the military masters the means to mass-produce super soldiers, it will be a disaster for the world. After all, after the mustache hit the street, in a few years, Lao Mei will start another unjust war. The super soldier plan of this era should be terminated. Oh, how boring. Somewhere in a barracks on the Italian front, Thor sighed. It has been several months since I came here, the two sides are evenly matched, and the war has fallen into anxiety. This is also because Thor deliberately dawdled. If he was a little more serious, this would already be hitting Berlin. He's not in the mood to put in too much effort and be a Yankee war hero. Definitely, if Thor is arranged to go to the Pacific battlefield, he will definitely not mind letting the other party see the wrath of the gods. But when he thought of the poor Captain America still being his internet celebrity, he couldn't help laughing out loud. "What are you laughing at? Whose head did you steal?" Peggy Carter came to him and sat down. "Why are you here?" Thor's face hurts. Recently, many other soldiers have complained to the officer. Black is a shameless old thief who specializes in head grabbing. He often explodes the opponent's head as soon as he aims at the target, in private, giving Thor the nickname, the head dog. Thor didn't take it seriously, and if he took the head with his ability, he didn't take the white or the white. Two soldiers walked past talking and laughing, and one of them said, "Have you heard that the circus troupe is coming to our barracks to perform?" "Never mind him, it's better to drive a dozen girls." Thornton suddenly became excited and said excitedly, "Steve is here. Come on, let's cheer him on." Peggy couldn't help but patted him, and smiled lightly. "Is there anyone like you as a friend? You are so gloating." In this era, entertainers and actors are far less popular than later generations. In the eyes of more people, guns are the romance of men. On the stage, Steve's performance did not have the expected effect. These soldiers who have experienced war are not so easy to fool. Only Thor waved his fist in the audience and shouted, "Good. Good. How do I feel like I'm a street performer?" Steve's face darkened. Peggy Carter couldn't help covering Thor's mouth. "It's too embarrassing." Everyone in the audience didn't buy it, and booed one after another. "Let's go, we want to see the girl." Eggs and fruits were thrown towards the stage, and Steve hurriedly raised his shield to block them. Unexpectedly, the first time I raised the shield, it was actually facing the friendly army. "Sweetheart, sign me up." The guy who spoke pulled down his pants and turned towards Steve. Steve frowned and stepped aside, replaced by a team of cheerleaders, and the atmosphere became lively. "Hey, Big star, you are doing well. I heard that you are a household name in China. Thor joked. Steve gave a wry smile. I can only improvise. After all, my previous audiences were kids. Brace yourself, you are America's new hope. Yeah, every time I go to a state, the bond sales increase by 10%. It's okay, at least I have something to do. Colonel Phillips even wants me to stay in the laboratory. Then do you only have these two options? The laboratory and the stage. Thor looked serious. You can do far more than that. Steve said helplessly. I've always dreamed of going abroad and serving the country on the front line. Now I'm finally here, but in this way. You need a chance to break the rules. Members don't think so. If you really obeyed the rules, you wouldn't sign up to join the army again and again. After a pause, Thor said in a deep voice, now it's time for you to be unruly. I heard the news today that the 171st Division is in Ozano and Schmidt's men had a fight, 200 people went, less than half came back. Of those who came back, I didn't see Bucky. What? Like a bolt from the blue, Steve stood up on the spot and ran towards Phillips' barracks despite the heavy rain. This is the opportunity you said? Peggy Carter asked, who had been silent. Yes, superhero, shouldn't be on stage. He needs an opportunity to prove himself. What about the captives? Is there a rescue plan? Steve asked excitedly at Phillips' desk. Phillips sighed, and said in a deep voice, yes, that is to win this war. Where are the captives kept? Captain America was in a hurry. When the war was over, Bucky's ashes would be cold. 30 miles behind the enemy, we have to go through heavy defenses. After a pause, he said in a low voice, this is not your business. You have a performance in half an hour, go prepare, leave alone. Okay, I understand. Captain America looked determined, and he knew that it was time for him to break the rules. Inside the tent, Steve and Thor are packing their gear. Actually, you don't have to come with us, Steve said. In fact, he also knew that the colonel was organizing manpower to try to rescue, and it was very risky to go to the enemy's rear to sneak in. No, you don't want to be a mascot, and I'm tired of eating and waiting to die, so let's play a big game together. But it's okay, you are the one who disobeys orders, and I am coerced. He made a joke, looked at Carter at the door and said, Miss Peggy, contact Stark for help. I heard that he is here. We need a flight crew. We can't let us run behind the enemy's rear, can we? Carter said with a dark face, I always feel that I was dragged into a thief ship by you. Stark is the best civilian flight officer, he is the only one who dares to send us here in this kind of horrible weather. On a transport plane, Peggy Carter explained to the two. This is crazy, I feel like all four of us are going to be court-martialed if we make it back alive, Stark complained, and he was definitely joking, to brighten up the atmosphere. It doesn't matter, Thor changed the topic indifferently, say, Mr. Stark, when do you plan to have a son? Your career must be inherited by someone. Oh, if possible, I'd rather have a daughter. At least the chance of becoming like me is lower. Steve asked, any problems like yours? I've always put my personal preferences ahead of the collective good, Howard added. And, son, there's a good chance he'll be a playboy like me. Don't think too much, you will definitely have a son, and he will be a more powerful playboy than you. Thor smiled wickedly. Peggy Carter was about to ask why, when the sound of guns sounded in her ears. We can't go any further, let's parachute ahead. Thor arranged the plan. After you go down, immediately sneak in to save people. I'm outside, trying to attract the attention of the enemy. Captain America naturally agrees, although it is more dangerous to sneak in, but he has nothing to fear, and he jumps first. Blake. Thor was about to jump off with a big package when Peggy Carter called him, come back alive. Don't worry, I will. Jumping down, tearing open the package in midair, there are 2 remodeled Gatlings. What is he trying to do? Peggy Carter looked back at Howard, he must be responsible for these 2 Gatlings. Howard shook his head, it's not me. She suddenly understood what Thor meant by attracting the enemy's attention, and immediately became anxious, and immediately shouted, quick, give me a parachute. Quick. No, Mr. Black told me that you must not let you go down and drag him down. At the gate of the Hydra camp, Steve looked at Thor with a machine gun on the left and right and dumbfounded, where did you find this thing? Captain, don't swear, Thor said lightly. Remember what I said. I will attract the attention of the enemy for you, and you are responsible for sneaking in. Just as Steve was about to speak, Thor ran to the back of a bunker with a gun in hand, grabbed the loudspeaker and yelled, "The nine-headed worm inside is coming out and dying." Gatling fires like crazy. Steve's face was covered in black lines. As expected, the Hydra soldiers were alarmed. It's hard not to be alarmed. With such a short distance and Gatling's rate of fire, Hydra almost thought that the Allied forces had already attacked. What's more, it was accompanied by greetings from the women of the other party's family. Steve's eyes were moist immediately. In his opinion, Black was dead. He was using his life to fight for the chance to save others. This guy is a noble person who is more qualified to receive super soldier serum than himself. Blake's sacrifice must not be in vain. Taking advantage of the guard's attention on Thor's side, Steve sneaked in quietly. With Thor pulling hatred, Steve, who originally had basically zero infiltration ability, sneaked in easily by relying on the skills of a Superman. As soon as Steve left, Thor let himself go. With his strength, wouldn't it be easy to abuse a group of mortals? Dual-wielding Gatling kept firing. Hydra was stunned. Obviously, many of them used energy guns made through Tesseract, but they were still at a disadvantage. Is this man a devil? Obviously carrying two Gatlings weighing several hundred kilograms, he ran faster than normal people, and rolled even more smoothly. A lot of people were hiding behind the bunker, and they were blown up as soon as they showed their heads. I have seen accurate marksmanship, but they are all sniper rifles. I have never seen heavy machine guns, especially Gatling, which can be really accurate. This thing is not purely used to rely on fast fire rate and is the clip large so that the firepower is suppressed. If Thor knew what they were thinking, he would have sneered, really thinking that I threw the hammer for nothing all these years. Not to mention such a short distance, even if it is 800 miles away, you can still smash your dog's head with a hammer. Not to mention you scumbags, even Thanos can't do it, say cut off your chest, never cut off your head. Originally, Thor grabbed an energy gun for fun, but found that although this thing is similar to a laser gun, but without the Tesseract charging, this thing can only be used as a fire stick after firing bullets. On the other hand, because most of the guards are going to fight Thor, there are a lot fewer people on Captain America, especially Thor told him some tips. Where did it come from? The guard guarding the prisoners stared at this strange guy, with one hand on the gun. Actually, Captain America could have brought him down with one blow, but glanced at the cell and didn't see Bucky. He said in a deep voice, "The head of state has already guessed that someone is coming to rescue the prisoners, so he asked me to convey the order to pull all these prisoners out and shoot them." The guard looked suspicious, when Steve leaned into his ear and whispered softly, "Hydra hail." The Hydra guard suddenly realized, and immediately took out the key to open the cell. Steve took a look and cursed, "Why are there only so many people? Idiots, don't tell me you let them go." A group of people were taken to the quarantine area over there for experiments. "No, he is a spy." The guard was stunned by the scolding, and subconsciously replied, and instantly realized that he was being cliched, "How could the insiders of Hydra don't know about the experiment?" He immediately drew his gun, but Steve, who moved faster, broke his neck. "Hi, I'm Captain America, I'm here to save you, everyone run." After explaining, he hurried towards Bucky. The captives reacted quickly found the weapons that had been confiscated before, and killed them all. Along the way, they found that there were not many guards in the huge base. When they rushed out of the gate, they found that Thor had already snatched a tank and was galloping in the camp. No wonder they heard the artillery fire outside. When Captain America led Bucky and ran out of the camp, the Hydra soldiers were almost kneeling. Seeing Thor's head poking out from the top of a battered tank, Steve couldn't help but burst into tears. "Hi, good brother, I'm so glad you're still alive." He couldn't help but punch Thor in the chest lightly. "Hey, I don't die that easily. I'm still waiting for the Howard family's son to call me uncle." Captain America was speechless. Why does this guy care so much about Howard's son? How did he know that Howard would definitely have a son? In the early morning, in the U.S. military barracks, Colonel Phillips sent a telegram to the hospital. The captain was missing in the third area behind enemy lines, and the search and rescue team found no results. Therefore, I can only declare that Captain Rogers was killed in action. After saying all this in person, the colonel couldn't hide his sad expression. This is, Carter brings news. The last reconnaissance plane has returned, and no signs of life have been detected. The colonel was very disappointed with Carter's self-assertion. He said in a deep voice, "We can't do anything to Stark. He is rich and the biggest weapon supplier, but you are nothing." Carter was expressionless. "With all due respect, sir. I don't regret everything I've done, and I'm sure they won't either." The colonel was furious. "I gave you a chance, Agent Carter. But now the big stars in the United States are dead, and many young people are dead, including the young man I am most optimistic about, because you like him." Carter argued. "That's not the case, I'm confident." "Then wait until this department is closed to see if you still have confidence." At this moment, there was a loud noise outside, and the two ran out. At the gate of the camp, Captain America and Bucky walked up side by side. Behind them was a tank, followed by thousands of captured soldiers. With weapons in their hands, many of them were injured, even missing arms and legs, and needed the support of their comrades to walk. It was obvious that this group had been through a tough fight not too long ago. In fact, they did not simply escape from the prisoner of war camp, but attacked from behind the German army and forcibly dug through the defense line and came back. "Look, who's back? Captain America." The crowd started to applaud. Peggy Carter scanned the crowd anxiously, and when she saw Thor coming out of the tank, she was relieved. Steve and Thor walked up to Colonel Phillips, saluted, and Steve spoke. "The wounded need treatment. We are willing to accept punishment." "No, it's you, not us." Phillips smiled softly. "That's not necessary." Turning around and walking away, walked to Peggy's side and listened for a while, and said softly, "I really need confidence, your vision is right." Peggy Carter walked up to Thor and said with a smile, "You're late." "It's okay." The colonel said that there will be no punishment today. The straight man replied. Peggy Carter suddenly felt angry. "Cheer for Captain America." Bucky shouted loudly on the side, and everyone responded one after another, cheering one after another. "Hey, Bucky, I have a share in saving people, don't be partial." Thor went up to make trouble. Go, you said it yourself. Steve dragged you there forcibly. Why do you go back on your word? Besides, you usually get a lot of limelight, let's let it go this time." Bucky's protective expression made Thor couldn't help but look at Peggy Carter, who was not far away looking at him. Captain America, women are tigers, and Winter Soldier is your thing." Going deep into the enemy's rear and rescuing a large number of prisoners, Steve and Thor became heroes in the eyes of many people, and both received the Medal of Courage from the President. No one will ever get Captain America back on stage to perform, and Colonel Phillips will never let him go. While rescuing Bucky, Steve glanced at the map and basically noted Hydra's weapon stronghold. "I have prepared the best fighters for you as teammates," Colonel Phillips said. "Excuse me, I also have candidates," Captain America solemnly said. Cheers. At the wine table, Thor assembled an elite team from the rescued captives. Roared Commando, "It's okay to fight together, but you have to do one thing." "What's up? Have a drink with us." When Peggy Carter walked in a red dress, everyone in the hall was down except for Thor, except that his physical fitness was being strengthened, and Steve, who was drinking far more than ordinary people, was still shaking. "Can't you let me save some time?" Peggy Carter said angrily. "Don't blame me, it's these guys who insist on challenging." Thor looked innocent. He is a big guy who can drink 400 caddies of beer. How dare a group of mortals compare their drinking capacity? Even Natalia, the most drinkable hairy sister in the future Avengers, can't resist a few rounds. Originally, Steve didn't want to make trouble with him. He is a good young man who doesn't drink, but Bucky insisted on coaxing him together. "Okay, Howard has prepared some new equipment for you, go and have a look tomorrow." Peggy finished speaking, staring at Thor. "Miss Page looked at me like that, could it be that she wanted to dance with me?" Thor joked. "I don't have the time now, wait until the war is over." "Well, when the war is over, we'll go dancing." As the Prince of Asgard, he is not comparable to a mortal like Captain America. What is a mere flag? Stand up and stand up. Early the next morning, Thor and Steve arrived at Howard's office. Perhaps it was fate. Steve ignored those high-tech shields carefully crafted by Howard, and took a fancy to a simple and violent buckler at a glance. Thor is equipped with various high-tech firearms, almost reaching unlimited ammunition. After seeing Thor's ability to use Gatling as an AWM, everyone agreed that this is the best sharpshooter in history. Although this guy's fighting ability is also abnormal. Originally, Thor asked Howard to create a vibranium hammer that imitated the shape of Mjolnir. Unfortunately, the shape of holding a gun in one hand and a hammer in the other was too unorthodox. Under Peggy Carter's strong opposition, he had to give up. But Steve, after picking up the hammer and trying it out, found that it was in his hand by accident. He fell in love with this hammer on the spot, second only to S.H.I.E.L.D. With a shield in one hand and a hammer in the other hand, in addition to not being able to discharge, the legendary hammer team who can fight Thanos 50-50 will play early. Mr. Stark, thank you for giving me this equipment, I have a gift for you. Thor said mysteriously. Oh, if you say that there is a beautiful girl to introduce to me, I might look forward to it more. These days, even Steve, a straight steel man, can see that Peggy Carter treats Thor unusually, let alone the old man. Howard is a slut, with a sour tone. Thor smiled and patted him on the shoulder, and gave him a hug. Asgardian friendship in the future world, this gift is precious enough. Howard rolled his eyes. Although he had known this guy's shamelessness for a long time, he was still shocked by his shamelessness. In fact, it was a precious gift. During the first hug, Thor slipped an agent-specific handy syringe into his back. The potion inside is exactly the improved version of Extremis brought from the future. It slightly improves strength and physical fitness, but greatly improves the function of recovery and regeneration. The value of this gift will not be reflected until half a century later. Drip. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 2, save Howard Stark, and prevent him from dying in the hands of the Winter Soldier in the future. Another branch is completed, and the last one has not yet been triggered. Thor guessed that the last mission might have something to do with the Red Skull. In the days that followed, the Howling Commando was committed to attacking Hydra's various factories in Europe. They were invincible and unstoppable, and Hydra's strongholds were taken down one by one. Captain America with the hammer and shield in his hand, even Thanos dared to take out a group of Hydra miscellaneous soldiers. Definitely beat them in a fancy way, and staged a scene of tearing devils with his hands and dismantling tanks with his bare hands every 3 days. When Captain America throws his invincible shield and raises his invincible hammer, all evil forces surrender. Waste. This term became the mantra of Red Skull during this period. Recently, Hydra's bases have been taken over by Howling Commandos one by one. No matter how strict the protection is, it's useless. He sent many people to surround this army, but they all returned without success. Even one of the most heavily guarded important strongholds with a large number of defenders that is almost impossible to lose was hit by a 1-meter-thick lightning strike on the energy system on a rainy day, blowing up from the inside. We are about to launch an attack that shocks the world, but we are delayed again and again. Just because you can't deal with a fool holding a shield, and a guy who just hides behind and shoots coldly. He growled angrily at Dr. Zola. That's not what I'm good at. I can develop weapons, but I can't make them fire. Also, the guy who can only shoot cold guns is more difficult than Captain America. An officer came to report. I'm sorry, Mr. Schmidt, we have fought to the last man. That line added fuel to the fire, and Red Skull finished him off with a single shot, obviously not. Then he turned his head and yelled at Dr. Zola, "Get rid of them, or you will know the consequences." The repeated setbacks made him almost lose his patience. If Dr. Zola hadn't been really useful, he would have been sent to a concentration camp long ago. Dr. Zola's face was somber. He knew the Red Skull meant what it said. On this day, the Roaring Commando finally got information from Dr. Zola about a train passing through the snow-capped mountains. No one knows, this is a trap, and the tremendous pressure brought by Red Skull made Dr. Zola decide to fight it out. While Steve and Bucky were separated by the gate controlled by Dr. Zola, Thor was alone in a car surrounded by a group of heavily armored soldiers. They are clad in thick alloy armor, which is difficult to penetrate even the strongest armor-piercing bullets. Is it specifically aimed at my layout? Thor looked up at the monitor. Who told you that I can only shoot? Pulled out the pistol, bang bang bang, a few times, not at the armored soldiers but at several cameras. On the other side, under the bombardment of energy weapons, Bucky raised his shield to block in front of Captain America, but unfortunately his physical fitness was not comparable to that of Captain America. He was blasted out of the carriage by a cannonball, and he firmly grasped the crumbling handrail outside the carriage. Enraged, Captain America smashed the enemy out of the car with a hammer, and crawled back out to reach Bucky. "Bucky, grab my hand." Bucky reached out, but fell into the abyss before he could hold Captain America. "Bucky." When Thor grabbed Dr. Zola and walked over, Captain America was squatting on the ground and gritting his teeth, trying to control his emotions. As in history, politicians won't let the talent of Dr. Zora go unnoticed, and that has nothing to do with Thor. Losing his little friend Winter Soldier, Captain America turned his grief and anger into strength, and after destroying multiple Hydra strongholds in succession, he finally found the Red Skull. Roaring Commando, launch the final battle against Hydra. Hydra's side retreated steadily, and Red Skull took the Tesseract and rushed to a bomber with huge amounts of it. The target of the bombers was New York. Thor, Peggy and others held back the others, while Steve chased after Red Skull, rushed into the fighter plane, and launched the fateful duel. Red Skull was no match for Captain America. Steve, equipped with a hammer shield, defeated him in a few strokes. Desperate to turn the tables, Red Skull grabs the Tesseract. But his power is not enough to control the space gem. The power of Rubik's Cube explodes in an instant, and Red Skull disappears from Captain America's sight. Captain America quickly got into the pilot's seat, only to find that the plane's autopilot had locked on to New York. If you change to a flight crew with professional skills, there may be other solutions. And Steve doesn't have this skill, he can only choose to climb and land. Reported the situation to the headquarters, he connected the channel to Thor. The Hydra soldiers have been cleared, and Thor and Peggy are responsible for the follow-up. Have you decided? Maybe we should contact Howard, he will have a way. Thor said. Steve shook his head. There's no time. I have to land right away. If it takes too long, many people will die. This is my choice. Okay. Although he knew this scene a long time ago, Thor was still a little emotional at this time. Is there any unfulfilled wish? No, unfortunately I don't see the day when the war is won, and I don't get a chance to see Bucky again. He pushed down the landing lever. There will be a chance. Peggy is now on the sidelines, quietly watching the two say goodbye. Boom. The plane crashed into the ice, sank to the bottom of the water, and was covered in ice and snow. The signal disappears. Thor was silent for a moment, then stood up suddenly. Where are you going? Peggy Carter asked. Thor gave her a deep look, without answering, and climbed into a fighter jet. Peggy Carter's expression changed. She gritted her teeth suddenly, followed and sat in the passenger seat. The two remained silent the whole time. The northernmost part of Alaska is only a few hundred kilometers from where Captain America crashed. Thor watched the sea quietly, with Peggy Carter standing beside him. After a long time, she spoke. Don't you have anything to tell me? Or, have you been hiding it from me? The expression on Thor's face changed. He turned his head to look at Peggy and said, What do you see? Peggy looked serious. You have been hiding it. I have investigated. Donald Blake, this name has never appeared, as if it appeared out of thin air. You had a good relationship with Steve very early on, even on purpose. Judging from your performance, you are not particularly keen on helping others. Perhaps, you have known for a long time that he will become Captain America. Bucky fell off a cliff. You didn't act that sad because you knew Sergeant Barnes was just missing, not dead. There are many more. For example, you know that Howard will have a son in the future, and you even know his character. You also know. Thor's face changed. These details are actually difficult for ordinary people to notice. She is indeed the strongest agent, or she has been paying attention to herself. Then have you guessed it? I couldn't guess it at first, and I wouldn't guess in that direction. However, one time when I was idle, I read a document introducing the theory of relativity, and then, the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was possible. Does space-time travel really exist? Thor was silent for a moment, then replied, It exists. These words actually confirmed Peggy Carter's guess. Sure enough, Peggy Carter's eyes lit up. It's unbelievable. A person who has been with you for so long is actually from the future. Is this why you have been avoiding me? Thor nodded. I can't stay in this era forever. I came here to do something. When I finish it, I have to go back more than 60 years later. Therefore, I can't leave too much concern in this era. Quote, he's not a shy boy like Steve, how could he not feel Peggy Carter's thoughts? But he has been pretending to be confused, because the two will eventually part. Peggy's face was a little sad. Yes, more than 60 years, how hopeless. For many people, it is even a lifetime. In a blink of an eye, he stared into Thor's eyes and asked earnestly, what if I say, I can wait for you for 60 years? She leaned against Thor slowly. Thor hesitated, but did not stop. The war will be won, right? Well, it won't be long. Donald Blake is not your real name, is it? What is your real name? Thor Odinson. Sounds like some mythical figure. It's me, do you believe it? Peggy stared at him for a while, then smiled. I believe, I heard a lot of incredible things today. I didn't expect that I would fall in love with a legendary god. Thor took out a syringe and used it on her. This is a strengthening potion in the future. Although it is not as effective as Super Soldier Serum, it is better in that it requires less and can make you recover faster after injury. Peggy Carter was about to speak when there was a sudden roar. Thor's face changed, he gently pushed Peggy away, and walked forward. With a thought, a dazzling light burst out from the army uniform on his body. Under Peggy Carter's shocking gaze, the pitch-black battle armor and the red cloak were instantly equipped on her body. Thor armor. The moment Red Skull activated the Tesseract before, a third side mission appeared before Thor's eyes. Drip. Congratulations to the host for discovering the mission, Eternal Secret, Branch 3. Complete all the branches to complete the mission. Branch 1. Completed. Branch 2. Completed. Branch 3. Stop the supergiant from taking the Tesseract and kill it. At this moment, Thor finally understood the key to repairing the timeline. Whether it is the relationship line of Captain America or the future of Howard Stark, it is actually not a big change. Even if you want to fix it, you don't have to do it yourself. The ones that could really make an impact are Supergiant and Tesseract. Without Tesseract, Captain Marvel will not appear in the future, and the idea of Avengers will not exist. Human beings will have to delay contact with alien civilizations for more than 10 years. No wonder, there were only 4 Black Orders under Thanos. It turns out that Supergiant had died on Earth in the 1940s. A female figure walked up slowly, with a slender figure, but a face uglier than Ebony Maw. Who are you? Supergiant looked vigilant. Although this man was wearing an ancient battle armor, he brought her more pressure than any previous opponent. A strange wave of energy came, one split into 2, one floated towards Thor, and the other quietly floated towards Peggy Carter not far away. Gotcha! Dazzling lightning surrounded the surroundings, and Supergiant's energy was dissipated instantly. Don't play your so-called mind control, you have no chance in front of me. Thor looked disdainful. In fact, he really doesn't think much of this Thanos scout. Even your master Thanos, who are you? Supergiant's face turned pale. She didn't expect the spiritual power of the person in front of her to be far superior to her. When she gritted her teeth, psychokinesis turned into a long spear and stabbed towards Thor. With a bang, mixed with a punch of lightning, it directly hit the tip of the spear, and the psychokinesis spear instantly shattered, and the rest of the momentum slapped on it endlessly. Ah! With a scream, Supergiant flew upside down more than 10 meters, and she looked at Thor in horror. With the Tesseract out of the way, staying alive is the most important thing now. She exhausted her strength again, released a mass of energy, shot straight at Peggy Carter, and fled in another direction. Thor quickly charged in front of Peggy Carter, punching the energy ball. Supergiant is not on the same level as herself, and the other Heiyao 4 generals are no match for her. She alone is delivering food, pay attention to her mind control, and she can be beaten casually. She's going to run. Even though she believed what Thor said, the scene just now shocked her greatly. Seeing that Supergiant has climbed into a fighter plane that has never been seen to take off, he hastily shouted. I can't run. Thor's eyes were fixed, and he pointed to the sky with one hand. A flash of lightning rushed into the sky, and the surrounding wind suddenly blew up. Peggy Carter had never seen before. The black clouds in the sky were so close to the ground like this moment, and the sound of thunder had never been so deafening, as if the whole sky was about to collapse. At the end of the sky, a dazzling bolt of lightning appeared across the sky, rushing towards the fighter plane where Supergiant was located with the power to destroy everything. Just rushing into the sky, Supergiant, who was still in shock, suddenly saw a bright light, and a random dazzling thunder rushed towards him. No, with a terrified cry, the fighter plane was bathed in lightning and instantly turned into ashes. Drip, congratulations to the host for completing the mission. Eternal Secret, Branch 3, stop the Supergiant from taking Tesseract and kill it. Drip, congratulations to the host for completing all the branches. The task, the Eternal Secret is completed, and the reward, eternal life. Drip, the task of repairing the timeline is completed, and the host will return within 10 minutes. Please be prepared. Warning, the host cannot carry any living things to the future. Carrying them forcibly will lead to forcible deactivation. You're leaving, aren't you? Peggy Carter whispered, her eyes full of sadness. Thor nodded. There are still 10 minutes. The two sat side by side, watching the sun disappear on the horizon. At that time, I was still alive, right? Well, we will meet again. Also, there are a few things you have to remember. Thor suddenly looked back at her and explained. At least in this century, don't let other people know my true identity, not even Stark. I'm sure you won't tell others about this, just find any reason for my departure. Also, retire early. Now that Dr. Zola has been recruited, it is inevitable that S.H.I.E.L.D. will become Snake and S.H.I.E.L.D. in the future. As one of the founders, if he stays in S.H.I.E.L.D., he is likely to be attacked by Hydra. Howard Stark is an example. Peggy Carter nodded. Although she didn't know the specific reason, she believed what Thor said. You still owe me a dance. Paige said suddenly. After the war is over, oh, I'm afraid it will be the next century. When can I see you? Wait until I take the initiative to ask you out. The inappropriate voice of the system reminded of. Hey, congratulations for triggering the Captain America-related mission. The Covenant of the Century, you will be rewarded for completing the mission. Mission objective. In the new century, invite Peggy Carter to dance. Mission reward. Dancing proficiency. The warm time always passed quickly, and a green light surrounded Thor. Use the skill on the target Peggy Carter, Immortality. Peggy Carter looked at the place where Thor disappeared in dismay, and finally couldn't help closing her eyes, with tears running down the corners of her eyes. For more than half a century, it is really hopeless. After a long time, she picked up the communicator. I found a Tesseract clue, the northernmost part of Alaska, close to my current coordinates. Captain America crashed and disappeared. A large number of Hydra remnants tried to snatch Tesseract but failed. Captain Black unfortunately fell into the sea during the battle and disappeared. Time flies, and in a blink of an eye, the war is over. The colleagues of the Roaring Commando gave a toast to Stephen Blake, and they did not forget the former leader. Howard followed the clues to find Tesseract. Even without the guidance of Tesseract's energy, he still did not give up searching. But in the huge Arctic Ocean, looking for two people under the cover of icebergs is tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. Paige calmed down from her initial disorientation and seemed to accept reality. Colonel Phillips handed Thor's retirement files to her, and she looked at the photos in a daze. One night in 1991, Howard Stark drove home alone. He was in a bad mood and just wanted to find a place to be alone. Back then, that nasty Blake was shot with a crow's mouth. His son was even more of an asshole than himself back then, and his reputation as a playboy in his early 20s had surpassed his own back then. Just thinking about it, suddenly the car lost control and hit a tree. A metal arm dragged him out. Howard looked up, and suddenly exclaimed, "Sergeant Barnes." His response was a hard punch, and then another punch. Gradually he lost consciousness. Confirming the target's death, Bucky faked the scene of the crash and disappeared into the darkness. About half an hour later, the fingers of the corpse on the ground moved. After this incident, Howard has always felt that he has a memory disorder. Even if the person who sacrificed for half a century appears, it is impossible for him to be so young. But after this difficulty, Howard, who seemed to be reborn, finally decided to let go. He handed over the company to Tony and hid himself behind the scenes. In 2005, Kamar Taj Holy Place, Ancient One was casting a spell. Suddenly a magician rushed in and shouted, "Your Highness Sorcerer Supreme, Caecilius has betrayed." Ancient One was startled, and the spell in his hand fluctuated. "Not good. Hurry up to make up for it," but the temporary difference finally caused an impact. Thor, who was supposed to return immediately, inevitably had a slight shift in return time and space. Looking at the dark world around him, Thor looked helpless. Ancient One, you half-witted magician, no wonder the dignified Earth Asgardian was stabbed to death with a knife. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.